I love the self-hushing crowd. I didn't even have to, didn't even have to clap. You guys are ready. Delighted to be here with you all, and thank you all for being here, because I know the siren call of perhaps an early train was taking some of your peers away. But we're very glad to have an audience here for this final discussion where industry leaders are reacting and reflecting on the meat of the conference and all the discussions we've been having the last few days. I think we can all agree it's been a really informative and exciting few days. I know Sally said before when we were getting started that she had a notebook just full of thoughts, and she was ready to go here to kind of start to process them. So the format for this is that we're going to talk amongst ourselves. I have some questions for the panelists, but we really want to have this be as interactive as possible. And so we're going to leave about half the time for your questions, for your thoughts, for the more of discussion. So please have those ready as we move on. But first, let me just introduce the panelists here that we have. I'm Lauren Kane from Bio1. We have Sami Benchikroon of Meressier. We have our wonderful keynote speaker, Max Bai from the Political Belief Lab, Rod Cookson from the Royal Society, and Sally Wilson from Emerald Publishing. And we all just want to also have a big thanks to ALPSP for having us here, and for the organizers and all the wonderful staff for everything they've done the past few days. So I want to kick it off with you, Max, since you are a newcomer to our community, and you had the wonderful keynote earlier this week, just a couple days ago. What are your thoughts now that you're coming here on Friday of what did you make of the community and of the conference?
Okay. Okay, just to make sure that it works. Yeah, it's a quite lovely conference, and speaking as a scientist, the only way I interact with publishers used to just be like, okay, I submit to a journal my research, and then magic happens. 3 months later, it got accepted or not, and then it appears on an outlet. So I never know what is going on behind the scene, and it's quite revealing for me to see like how much process people have to follow, and how much work is behind the scene, and. Also, just I'm also quite really just impressed in terms of how self-reflective and self-criticizing the community is, and which I see as a really healthy sign for any self-sustaining, self-governing community, so that we can grow better and improve better and have a I don't know, just like have a more sustainable model for how the field goes in the future. So I quite like that.
I think being critical of our community is something that we're good at, but hopefully we can be constructive as well. So the rest of you, a little more veterans of the industry, what did you think of the conference? Anything that stuck out as being different or unique?
Veterans, who do you speak to now?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I always love ALPSP, not only because I'm on the board here, but also because the community is wonderful, and the connections are great. I think the interesting perspective that I'm always gathering is sort of the novelties that are happening. You know, there's wonderful lightning industry news sessions with new technologies that are emerging. I mean, I'm always looking at things from with a tech angle or with a new products angle, and I'm always fascinated on what kind of new ideas that are coming up. And I mean, AI seems to be everywhere, and but you know, looking a little bit more nuanced into applications and so on and so forth. I think that was interesting on seeing where we still need to learn, where we need to still make mistakes maybe, and then sort of how to iterate. I quite like that.
Sally, amidst that filled notebook, what do you think your key takeaway from the conference was?
3 words kept resonating for me through the conference. So one was human, and we were obviously talking about it in relation to AI, but also in terms of connections and listening. And then it always, just a perennial theme, I think, for any conference and for our industry is trust and what that means. So trust amongst the publication process, trust within our communities. And I think that kept coming up again and again in every session. And I think also that practical implementation, which was obviously the overarching theme of the conference. And I think that's why I have a filled notebook. It's what can I take back? What can I digest when I'm a little less tired after festivities last night, but what can I digest and what can I advocate for those who weren't able to be here at this fantastic conference, but what can I take back? What learnings can I share, and how can we move forward?
And what about you, Rob? Rod, any themes of the conference?
Yeah. I mean, I think Richard Geddy could have asked more questions I knew the answer to in the quiz yesterday. Would have been appreciated. I'd echo your point, Sammy, and what you were just saying, Sally, that there've been plenty of conferences where you go along and you look at the agenda and it's like AI and library systems, AI and publishing, AI and the future of XXX, insert here. And I found those slightly overwhelming, that everything's going to change, no one's quite sure how. I've had more conversations here where people using AI tools are actually got viable, interesting propositions. You think, oh yeah, I can see how that could help what we do, that's interesting. And it's moved from that kind of big cloud on the horizon to actually being something quite usable and practical in quite a short time, which I think is echoing what you were saying and the theme of the meeting. So that's been interesting and that's been very, very nice. I'd pick out a couple of other things too. One would be a question in Will and Leslie's session at the end of yesterday. They asked the question, which I remember people asking when I was at Blackwell 20, 25 years ago, of should we stop thinking about journals and should we be thinking about the article? And the framework they were putting that in is if everything gets ingested into LLMs, what really does a journal mean at that point? If people are just directly interacting with the content and even the substance of the content. And I think Sophia Anderson had made a similar point earlier. And perhaps there's some questions there for us to think about how we design articles so that they do have more autonomy and they do function more as standalone units if they're increasingly going to be separated from the journals that we publish them in future. And then the other point I was going to make was I was extremely pleased to hear Monica Weston say yesterday that she thought the free rider issue with Subscribe to Open was kind of a bit of a kind of curious, chimeric sort of fantasy in the mind of one or two people, but not something she really encountered as a recovering librarian who knew lots of other librarians. And what she stressed, which was very helpful to hear in a time of lots of change, was that librarians still think about the same kind of considerations and metrics they always used to. They think about cost per use, they think about equity, they think about transparency, they think about their actual needs, specifically of their institution, where it is. And I think that's a really helpful, somewhere between corrective and steer for a publisher, that we can try different models like Subscribe to Open that she was specifically talking about. We need to talk to librarians, we need to collaborate with the librarians, but as long as we're still working out propositions that work for them, that work for the publishers, then there's lots of things we can do, and we shouldn't get too sort of confused by some of the alarmist noises that perhaps sometimes enter these discussions.
Now, obviously there are limitations in the 3-day program, but was there anything that you all were surprised that was not on the program or was not elements of the discussions that you heard having in the room? Anything that you'd like to see on there in the future that you thought was mysteriously absent from the discussions?
Shall I start? Yeah, perfect. So, I mean, let me start the spiciness. I mean, I'm maybe known for that. So, I think my observation always with conferences that are around scholarly publishing is that obviously we're focusing around dynamics within the industry, around future of peer review, future of licensing, and so on and so forth. But I think in these days there's just bigger themes that emerge in terms of should we look at scholarly communication, scholarly publishing, or is it now about science as such, right? So where are sort of the frictions, and where does this rather small industry interacts with so many other industries, right? I mean, Elon Musk just said this wonderful sentence that everybody, puts a question mark on about there is no scientists anymore, there are only engineers, and that sort of affects immediately our industry. So I feel that there potentially room for quite groundbreaking conversations that would potentially inspire all of us and guide us into different directions, rather than talking about open access.
Max, any preconceptions that you perhaps brought into the conference that you were surprised didn't play out? Were there things that you thought were going to be discussed but was not?
I would just say that, well, first, I have to qualify that. Like, this is my first time attending the conference, and I'm probably more of an outsider than anyone else here. But I would personally appreciate a little bit more voices from university and just people who are actually scientists that on the supplier, well, essentially on the upper stream of what this supply chain for what is produced along the academic publishers. It does sound like the point I was making about understanding the audience deeply is something that seems to resonate in several sessions in the last 2 days. And if that is the case, why not just bring more scientists and let's see what they're saying. What is the incentive for scientists to either get into high impact journal or or open access? Like, what is the fundamental need any of those things are reflecting, or are these things by themselves, are the books that people are trying to get, or they're just the instrument for something else? On that point, I actually want to mention that like it does seem to be the case when I chatted with a couple of people here. I would say that would be a misconception for some people to think that like scientists just want to get more publications so that they can get tenured and they're done, and that's the book. Speaking as a scientist, that is not what I care at all, and I would say that's not what a lot of my colleagues care about. What they care about is the impact that this thing signals. Does this thing really change how other scientists think about the world? Does this work that I'm publishing or writing change how the society is going to function in the future? Does it change the policy that people are implementing in the White House or not? But the way to quantify that, precisely because the scientific impact is something that is really hard to take hold of, hard to quantify. And some of the best way to quantify that is just counting the citation number. And the citation number happened to be something that highly correlates with the journal where it goes to. So then we just resort to like, okay, let's see if we can get into a high impact journal or not. But if like there's a better way that publishers can quantify, reflect, and measure the impact in better ways, I would wager that a lot of scientists wouldn't even care where they're publishing. And we're already frankly seeing the trend where a lot of preprints are being cited before they are even going into the review process. And like say Brian Nozick, we all know his open science movement. He was invited by a lot of universities, including my own, before that paper went into Science. It was the impact that the academic community already saw before that sticker was put on him that propelled his influence and his popularity in scientific community. Sorry for speaking a little too much on that front, but that's some of my reactions here.
If I may build on that, just one anecdote. I think 12 years ago, or something like that, when I was at the first scholarly publishing conference, I realized that there were, I think, 5 halls, large like that, and then there was one dedicated session that was in one of the smallest rooms, and the session title was "Ask the Researcher." There were 5 researchers on the panel, and the room was completely overcrowded, and the publishers were sort of in the room sitting on top of one another almost, which surprised me, to be frank, because it should be in the sort of first interest of every publisher to exactly know what the researchers think, what their thoughts are, and maybe just to poke a couple of holes here. I think that could be a good opportunity to actually invite more scholars and researchers to those conferences, specifically in these times where workflow technology are not the best, right? They're still stuck in the 90s, and the usability is still a little bit frictionful. So I mean, I think that should be actually highest priority here. Just going to poke the publishers here.
No, I really like the idea of bringing the researchers more into the conference, and perhaps even fantastic innovation awards, and perhaps having them judge the competition as well. Having a voice on the judging panel. I think the other thing is sometimes when you're at these events and for a couple of days you feel a little bit insular, and a lot has gone on while we've been here in Manchester at this conference, just on the world stage, and you know, the trust in science and you know, the funding pressures. We've talked about funding pressures in Global South, but just the funding pressures just generally, and the geopolitical impact. You know, I think about defend research is something that Emerald has been speaking out about, and the debates that we've been having internally around what does it mean to be a publisher, to defend scholarship itself, so to create the right environments for it to publish, and you know, what is the role of the publisher? So that's something that's been very much the conversations I've been having, and we've been supporting. You know, the librarian community is so important, and the work they do, and support the advocacy work that something like Every Library does. So it's thinking about what is the role of the publisher beyond making sure that we're harnessing the technology, that we're improving the author experience, but you know, standing up for science. I think that's a really important role that we have to play.
I think you're absolutely right, Max, that we could be more inclusive as a community, for sure. I think, and this is not a criticism of ALPS, I think we've heard this for a lot of conferences, a lot of groups, is that we occasionally have a little bit of tokenism where we're going to invite a researcher, or even to your example, Sammy, of we're going to have 5 of them in a room and we're going to ask them things, instead of truly having them be a part of the community and a part of the solutions. I think another thing that we've often observed is that these conferences can also sometimes be a lot of talk in terms of theoretical, what could happen, what should happen, and a little less in terms of what are we actually going to do, or more case study, real operationally based. So a question to you, want to kick it off, Rod, of
I'm still going to do the previous one.
but do you think, and feel free to answer that as well, but do you think that this conference, the discussions that you heard, are we being action-oriented enough in what comes next?
I think the conversations I've been in, you know, in the sort of, you know, the other parts of the hotel, and the sessions I've been to, I think we're being action-oriented at some of the smaller scales, and a bit more philosophical at the larger scales. And to come back to the point I was going to make for your previous question, I mean, I think I would like to see more of, perhaps in the next meeting, is we do seem to have got to a point where lots of the problems, lots of the challenges that we as publishers face need solutions from multiple stakeholders. They're not things that one publisher or even a set of publishers can solve on their own. You know, when you're talking about some of the business model challenges, those really are discussions that need to be publishers, librarians, and funders. And there have been librarians, you know, visible and sort of articulate at this meeting. 1 or 2 funders, not many funders, and the funders have been rather absent in some of the more important discussions in the past 5 years, perhaps. They were sort of more engaged before. So that might be nice, bringing some of those people together and perhaps having perhaps some frictive discussions, because there are differences of opinion, and have a little, you know, a few sparks flying. I think, you know, where we talk about things like the LLMs arriving in our world with big tech companies with very, very large budgets and agendas that might be totally inconsistent with any publisher, any librarian, any funder in the research sector, I think that needs, you know, collective discussion and collective agreement about how do you respond to that, and sort of coordinated action. I think some of the very broad questions about how do you separate research assessment from journal metrics, which it's not an immediate problem for a journal publisher, but lots of the bad behavior that we spend a very large amount of our time dealing with stems from having very bad incentives in some universities, in some countries, in some institutions, and researchers go off and do things that for them are completely rational, but really quite destructive in terms of the research community. And I think if you can solve some of those problems at source, you can make life much, much easier for everyone else involved in the communication process. None of these things get solved by, you know, just one of us sitting down and thinking really hard. They are quite collaborative, and I think we need more discussions across stakeholders. So perhaps the suggestion for next year would be, can we find those kind of discussions that have been going on and talk about some of the success stories and perhaps some of the things that have been complicating in those, and jumping 1 or 2 steps before. I mean, I also think there's a broader governance point that we've operated for many decades with trade bodies like ALPSP. I do wonder on some of these questions if we might actually need formal governance structures to work out how do you deal with things like the big tech companies and the LLMs arriving, hitting the entire sector at once, and to work out what is our collected rational response that helps us keep doing what we need to do.
While we're on the topic of reinvention and thinking about the structures that underlie our industry, one of the things that I found really interesting that you kind of kicked off in my brain, Max, in your opening keynote, was this idea of the contrarian principle and these innovation hacks in terms of thinking about things differently. And one of the questions you posed was, is there anything that is sacred in your industry that should not be? So things that we just kind of take for granted, and we're explaining to developers of, well, this is just the way it's done, this is the way it's always been, and it will always be. And so I'm really interested from the panel of what do you think is the one thing in our industry, there's probably more than one thing, but that if you could reinvent it, that is sacred, being treated sacred now, but should not be. I know you have some strong thoughts on this topic, Sammy.
Oh yeah, I mean, the list is so long that I don't know really where to start. I mean, when I'm speaking to people that are not from the industry, but more from sort of the tech world, and try to describe what is scholarly publishing and how does it work, I fail miserably, continuously, but what I always say is that there was this beautiful Forbes this headline, 1998 or something like that, saying the first industry that is going to be completely disrupted is scholarly publishing. I would suggest that the last industry that has not yet been fully disrupted is scholarly publishing, in essence. And I guess the question begs: are we again in such a question with AI sort of rolling towards us as sort of very strong content type of content-focused technology? Is scholarly publishing the first industry that is going to be now disrupted for good or not? And I mean, I'm making continuously the mistake to say, yeah, now everything will change. Next year, everything will be different. I mean, research integrity crisis, now we need to act. Open access, now we need to act. And I find myself every year again in the same position to say, has it actually changed? And what has changed? So I think that there's so many dynamics, so many things that are sacred, like the way we're doing peer review, like our business models. I mean, like tenure. There's a long list, and I think all of those components make it almost impossible to really have that explosion, and suddenly that industry is completely different. So yeah, maybe we should be a little bit more attentive about what is sacred, and then just tweaking here and there, and then potentially things might change, or not.
I think you're right, though. I think we're part of another program committee for another conference, and we were going through the titles for the keynote, and we said, are you aware that you've had scholarly publishing at a turning point, a crossroads, a nexus for the last 5 years? And maybe if we go back further than that. So I do think we always feel as a community very hopeful that we are finally here, we're on the precipice, we're on the cusp, but are we really, or are we going to be on that cusp forever?
Yeah. Well, one thing I'm really glad about seeing the concern about the community showing up again and again is actually a really good sign for any healthy and self-sustaining community. It means like you're always worrying, okay, what are we now doing right, and how we can self-correct. So, and that is precisely the step, well, not even zero, like a -1 on doing innovation, because like without the motivation, like why do we change? We already have a mode, we're comfortable, why do we change? So I will actually say like that is a good thing, that we continue to identify new sources of change. But going back to what you were saying earlier, like what are some of the sacred rule or things that could have been potentially we can get rid of and replace. What I'm thinking is something that's even one step. Well, I'm thinking. Okay, what I'm thinking is there, whenever there's an opportunity for a lot of disruption and disruptive innovation, sure, one way we can do is just to see what kind of specific feature we can take away and add, optimize the user experience. It is usually a more incremental change, but fundamentally, what is the thing that we're trying to address in terms of the user's needs? For academic publishing, I think it's a good time for us to think about, okay, what are the whole if the users, researchers are here and they want to get here, what is this whole process they have to go through, starting from point one? And what can we take away that is adding the friction to the experience? And if there's only one thing that they truly care about, that truly is what academic publishers are adding value to, and I personally identify that as improving the work of research and authenticating so that other people know that this is considered as knowledge. Like before that, it is a researcher's personal observation notes. At some point, it became humanity's knowledge. It is this thing that allow this information, this written stuff, crosses that line. That is where publishers are adding value. But then everything else here, what can we take out so that we can make things easier? Someone else mentioned like the format-free thing, why we're still doing this. Like it is so frustrating for me as a researcher every time I have to change things, then I have to delete a whole paragraph just to fit into that journal standard. What can we do to change that? Or nowadays we're having a really big reviewer shortage. For me as a reviewer and a scientist, it's quite frustrating that I have to keep waiting for a very long cycle for something that is really time relevant, like my AI paper that was delayed in the pipeline for quite a while just because we're waiting for reviewers' comments. But what a lot of time really happens is that then you just have the same reviewer reviewing the paper in the next round. It's like, what can we do to facilitate it? Like, chances are when you have the same person, when you have the same paper reviewed by multiple journals, you have 80% of the overlap in terms of what they can say. What can we facilitate this process so that we don't have to just waste all these shortcomings that are already identified in the last round, so that we can actually turn that into a value add in terms of making it turning it into the knowledge and a better work. Anyway, I think the bigger work is just really the deconstruction of the process part and identifying what is the must need and get rid of everything else for a particular organization to do.
If I may just add to that, you asked what is sacred. I was just thinking continuously about that damn PDF that we're still sort of pushing around. And in essence, PDF is a format that that started off in the printing world. So essentially we can make the argument that we've completely slept over this internet revolution and are still in sort of a world that is fully focused on print, right? So we are still essentially, we're not in the electronic, nor are we in a digital, nor are we in an AI world. So it seems like we got to do some leapfrogging here from an innovative standpoint. And I guess, I think that is alarming for an industry who still is relied on print technology in a world of AI. So, I mean, but then again, I'm saying that and realizing at the same time that next year I'll be sitting here and saying, what has changed? Nothing. So, I mean, maybe it's sort of a call to action to everyone here to really rethink that damn PDF. And I think that there are already great examples. I mean, I was just thinking about Cassini, which is a great company who does seminars, right? So, I mean, there are already great formats, different kinds of formats that now need to just step up in essence, and then we can get rid of the PDF. Yeah. Getting rid of the PDF. Can we tweet all of that now?
I feel very strongly about this.
Yeah. I just, there's an energy that just came.
Yeah. Sally?
It's not getting rid of the article, but putting the article on steroids, I think, and thinking about the different formats that you can have around the article that could really help with dissemination. So I got really excited about the podcast technology yesterday, so to take an article and take it beyond the academy and to find ways of informing people in a really time-efficient way as well. And I was really interested in how the people are listing things on mobile devices, accessing research on mobile devices. So I think it's, yes, elevating the articles, as Rod was saying earlier, and moving beyond those sort of the journal brand and thinking about things at article level, but at article plus, that really engages the community and those people who are going to benefit from that research. So how can we really push forward with dissemination? And I agree with Sammy, we are tied to our print past and the PDF, and you know, we keep saying we're going to be digital first, but still the remnants of that print legacies just still persist. So I don't know how we get rid of that. Do we, you know, if we started again, I guess our industry would look very, very different.
Yeah. Well, as a Berliner, I need to say, tear down these walls. So I'm going to tear down PDFs. So I think that's going to be the new
But
step.
I get really excited about the multiple formats that could bring research to life.
You've slightly stolen my thunder, Sammy. I was about to say PDF. I might couch it slightly differently. So, I mean, the PDF has been very good for things like, you know, from an archive perspective, it's extremely durable. Once you've created it, it stays there. It doesn't get kind of, you know, even if there's link rot, the actual file is intact. It does kind of preserve information in one format. It's quite a convenient thing for one researcher to send to another. You know, here's my latest article, boom, the whole thing's there contained. I think we're getting to the point where, you know, some of its limitations are sort of starting to outweigh the benefits of how simple it has been to operationalize in an online world for publishers. It's really not designed for a machine to read it, you know, so, you know, it's, if you were choosing to feed a good, useful, well-designed Gen AI system, you wouldn't be giving it a PDF. It's a silly way of transmitting information. And I think sort of broadening that out, I think you do find articles these days where, you know, reducing, oversimplifying, you know, sort of slightly for effect. You know, you've got a data set and you've got words which explain what the data set is, where it came from, but they're kind of like really complicated metadata. And, you know, they're written as if it's a prose train of thought, but really the data set for many articles is the entire substance of the article, and you're explaining where it came from, what its limitations are, what people might do with that. You have other articles where there are various different data sets coming together, and there is more of a case of building an argument based on information coming together. But again, you know, even in that situation, it's not particularly what would be useful for a machine. And then I think you can reverse that question and think back, you know, think of what things like initiatives like Octopus are doing, you know, where they're kind of interested in sort of other useful ways you could atomize an article. And one of the trains of thought in Octopus is, in some fields, there are quite standard methodologies. Why does every researcher have to write their method section from scratch when you could just have a library, a bit like a sort of, you know, version control software, where this is a standard method for doing this thing, and what you write in the article to explain what you've done is we did method 14C, and we made these changes, and we made these changes for these reasons. That's actually much more informative to the person reading it. You know, I understand the standard way of doing it. Now you've explained why you deviate, and that would have confused me if I had to read 2 or 3 pages of methodology of what you actually did do, but you've made it really clear for me. I think there is scope to make the reading experience better by sort of pulling the article apart. And given we are moving into the world where Gen AI can actually write some things better than humans can, perhaps we should think about making the writing experience simpler as well, and really focus on what are we trying to convey with this article. And often it's data, it might be video, it might be a map, it might be some charts, but it's not really the words. And I think we got slightly fixated on the words being the key thing, because that's what works in the print world. It's what you capture in the PDF. And I think perhaps letting go of that, we have one beautiful way it all comes together and it stays together and it doesn't fall apart. And thinking a bit more about who are our users. If for this kind of article, it's primarily going to be machines, let's give them the information differently.
So one more question from me, and then I want to open up to the audience, who I'm hoping has many questions for this group. First, very briefly, where are we in terms of the AI life cycle? It feels to me a bit like when 5-10 years ago, every single session had some element of being about open access. So when we think about next year's conference, are we going to have more, less, or the same talking about AI?
I'm not an AI expert by any stretch of imagination. I mean, I think it's felt this time that we're more embracing AI, less suspicious, still rightly concerned, I think. And it's not AI itself, it's the human intervention in AI. AI for good, AI for evil is probably too strong a word, but AI for not for good. I think we will still be talking about AI, it's not going to go away. But I think it's how we enhance it and how we enhance the experience for our stakeholders is really important. But I agree with Rod, we do need to talk about it as an industry rather than tackling it piecemeal or within silos. But yes, next year we will still be talking about AI. And I think what's really hard to predict is the advances of AI. So some of the limitations that we were talking about in terms of equity in the previous session around language, it would be fantastic if, you know, it's quite possible that we aren't going to be tied to Roman languages in the scholarly process if AI can really look at non-Roman languages and really embrace that. So that's the exciting elements of AI in terms of how quickly it progresses and develops. That is exciting, but I think we will still be talking about AI. But I think we really need to talk about responsible AI and how we move together as an industry.
I think we will speak less about AI, and the reason for that is that I think that AI is going to be a moat. It's not going to be a, you know, like a business model or a challenge that we're facing. It's just going to be a moat. It's there. It's omnipresent. It's just, you know, let's accept it as air that we breathe, which, if that is the case, would be exciting because then we can finally talk about what the impact is, right? You know, what are the things that need to change now that AI is the mode, and it feels like there is already early signs for that are happening. Specifically in the funder community, I feel that there's more and more funders that are just opening up mandates of saying, no, this got to change. You know, you got to publish this as well. So there seems to be, which I feel is rather dangerous for the industry. There's external forces that are sort of almost you know, pressuring our industry to move in certain directions. So I think yet another call for action next to my PDF must go is I think we are in an interesting opportunity to actually shape the future of scholarly publishing and not be shapen. So I think we got to just take sort of everything to our hand and just do it as we want it to be and not as others think it should be. So I think that's long answer on AI, so less AI. So
you have more AI, less AI. Would you like to be the tiebreaker?
I can make a plea for let's stop using the phrase AI. Yeah. I think it's already gone beyond that. I think there's a big difference between an LLM being made by Meta or OpenAI or Anthropic, which is phenomenally expensive. You know, in frank terms, it's outside the price range of what anyone in this room corporately, individually could afford to do. You know, these are things that cost billions of dollars to build at the big scale. Whether at the smaller scale, they're probably better done by researchers who actually understand fields and build LLMs that solve particular challenges for that research community. And it's not really a publisher task. The interesting conversations I've had here, which are kind of AI related, I would say are more now becoming workflow solutions, somewhere between workflow solutions and doing things with big data that we've not been able to do before. And I'd suggest we're kind of entering big data 2.0 rather than we're entering AI. We didn't used to use data very much in publishing. If you look back at, as I have done occasionally, publishing reports in the 1950s, they're pretty short documents. They tell you how many subscribers, maybe how many papers. They might pick out sort of one or two sort of headlines, but they're sort of 3 or 4 sheets of A4 typed, quite large type, rather thin. We moved beyond that in the past 15 years. We have dashboards giving us information about turnaround times and downloads and citations and, you know, sort of other metrics, other KPIs that are very good for steering teams and for guiding us. And I think the AI technologies are now allowing us to get to the point where you can start saying, okay, of my authors, what are they writing about that's getting a particularly good response in terms of citations? Who are the reviewers who always respond on time? I've got a paper on this topic. Who are the reviewers I don't know that are somewhat close to my community that I might ask to review this paper, which will be genuinely interesting to them, and they're the right people to ask. We're starting to get insights into those kind of questions, rather more than just let's give it to an expert and say, who do you know who roughly works in this field that we might send this out to review for? Or having in-house staff who've got a list of people who are good people, but they're kind of the same people every time, and they're not necessarily the best people to review a paper. This information is in the data we've got. We've just not really known what to do with it. And I think what we're talking about as AI now are some ways of actually opening that up and doing very useful things which save us lots of time, give much better outcomes. Hopefully, might lead us to ask peer reviewers to review less and reduce some of that benefit and get better decisions at the end of it. So I say big data 2.0, less talking about AI.
Love it. Well, I definitely want to get to the audience questions now. So please, it looks like we already have one. If you can also make sure to say your name and your affiliation, and also hoping someone's going to defend the PDF to Sammy as well.
Hello, Ola Tornquist, London Mathematical Society. I am exactly going to defend I completely agree with Rod that it's an extremely useful tool at the moment, the currently best tool for preserving manuscripts in its exact form and archiving it. Now, I have to explain that I come from a community of mathematicians, and perhaps I'm also a physicist. And in both those areas, the attitude to presentation of papers and articles is different. In fact, authors in these areas are not at all interested in, let me deviate here and say that I assume that tech companies that are attending this conference are quite often interested in things such as how do I make the content accessible on the largest number of devices, the smallest kind of devices? How do I get papers read on a mobile phone? My community doesn't care at all about their papers being read on a mobile phone, and they don't want it to be read on a mobile phone. The reason is that things like long equations, they can mean something entirely different if the line break is in a different place. And efforts to try to make text reflow and all sorts of things is completely futile and unimportant in mathematics. What they want to see, my authors, is they want to see something that's exactly the way that they have provided it. Don't touch it. And they absolutely want that to be preserved for eternity. And I think what we need is, if we're not using the PDF, we want something that's a really persistent and unchangeable format, but which can also be communicated to machines if that's necessary.
Well, thank you so much for that. I think the other thing I really like about that answer is that it brings us back to something that you said, Max, of we need to remember that we need to go to the actual researchers, to the authors, and ask them what do they need, and also understand that different communities do have different needs or things, different preferences, different ways of researching. Other thoughts from the group on that comment? Are you shamed?
No, I still tear down PDFs, so I'm just going to continue. I mean, I think you made a wonderful point to just exactly what Lauren said. I mean, there's different needs, different communities have different perspectives. I think it's about just focusing on one format only, which is the PDF. The article is just one thing, right? No matter if you're in physics and mathematics and life science. I think, nuancing is just in the nature of the interdisciplinarity. So, I mean, good for mathematics to have PDFs still, but I think that there are other, like architects or historians, that would love to not have a damn PDF.
Yeah, and if I can add something, I mean, the meaning coming from the sequence really is field specific. I mean, historians, if you take the paragraphs of a history article and put them in different order, you haven't really got anything particularly useful. You've just got gibberish. You do need to read certain things in sequence, and in maths, evidently you're saying that's the case. In many humanities, social science fields, that's going to be the case, but it's not the case in all fields, and perhaps we just need to move away from the idea that there's one format that, triumphs over all, and actually have multiple formats that work in different communities. I'd also, sort of add the point, thinking what you said, Ola, that, I don't know who's still got 3.5-inch discs floating around in drawers somewhere, or 5.5-inch floppy disks. The number of formats that have come and gone, that you look at them and think, what do I do with this, laser disk or whatever that's somewhere at the back of a cupboard, unusable now. You know, VHS cassettes. What do you do with VHS cassettes? I think you know the fact that PDF has been such a supportable and usable format over a long time is not to be dismissed lightly. It's just not the best way to solve some of the problems we now face for researchers and for publishers.
I think this is a lesson we're learning over and over again too, is that not just when it comes to formats, there is no one size fits all, right? There's nothing in terms of the formats, in terms of processes, in terms of business models. And it does seem like as an industry though, we keep coming back to this hope that there will be something that will fix all of our problems, but it's a lot more gray than it is black and white. Other questions? I think she.
Rob Johnson of Research Consulting. There's been a lot about technology inevitably. I mean, one of the other factors that shapes the world is politics, and we are in an increasingly sort of unstable situation geopolitically. I was just wondering sort of what you feel the outlook is for publishing. So we've got technological challenges, obviously growth of outputs continues, but I think growth in budgets looks less and less likely, at least in the Western world. So how do you feel about the outlook? Do you feel positive? Do you feel sort of a bit gloomy? I'd be interested in your thoughts.
I don't feel positive. I mean, yesterday they were saying, somebody quoted 3% growth in research. I think it depends by discipline again. It's come back to that one size fits all. I feel a little bit worried for climate science, for anything in the D&I space, for social sciences generally, where research could get deprioritized. But I'm cautiously optimistic that we have a vibrant community, we have an innovative community, that people find a way around things. But yes, we live in uncertain times, I think. And I think we would be foolish not to recognise that and to make sure that we're not too insular and that we're looking at what's going on and reacting.
Yeah, I mean, for me, everything is always positive in my worldview. Always the maximum optimist, and the reason I'm also optimistic for scholarly publishing is that I think that there's enough pressures now, finally, to force us to reinvent ourselves. And I think that there's great opportunities on the horizon, and there's a lot of publishers who are working on really, really great projects that are not only focused on scholarly communication in a very rigid definition, but really in a different definition of more, what can we do for science as such? And I think that just from a business perspective, in science, there's many, many, many opportunities now also with AI, and I think there's publishers who see these opportunities. So I see, the fittest will win, but it needs a reinvention, definitely.
Yeah. This is an interesting question. I also have happened to keep asking the audience in the last 2 days, like, what do you see where the academic publishers are going in the next 10 years? I was a little surprised to hear that there's a more almost like hopelessness and despair. It's like, okay, our industry might just disappear, or okay, it might turn into different ways. Well, from the perspective of scientists, that's actually not what I want to see. There are real value that's added by publishers. After me writing a paper, in between that output and this thing turning into a knowledge that other academics in my circle recognize as something citable, something that they will teach to their undergrads, there is a step that's needed. It's like what they consider as a secret step of passing the gate. It is to be authenticated via this process of people criticizing it, making sure there's a nothing that is too controversial or invalid claim. And in many ways, I just keep going back to this long chain of process where every researchers have to pass to get to that point. What is the most critical value that we're adding? And I would really just say it is that. And how can we do that? And in many ways, publishers have already reinvented yourself in so many ways in the past. It's no longer a printing service. the distributional process, that is almost irrelevant too, with people who can just like really building their own brand as researchers. Like I can just post on Twitter and I got more citations that way instead of getting people receiving the physical mail in their office or going to a library. But it is really the very manual, very knowledge intensive process of finding the right reviewer to say the right things that critically assess the paper and make the author actually put those things in there, maybe run another experiment, maybe qualify their claim, maybe analyze their data in a different way. That is the most critical thing, me as the researcher, I want. And I never want to do that myself. Speaking of which, I also want to add a little anecdote here. My publisher Perish game, one thing that I did that's completely unnecessary for that game was that I peer review my trivia question. It is I run the company myself. I designed the whole game myself. Why do I do that? That's precisely because I know this is a process that is trusted by scientists. And my audience are scientists. They want the information that are valid, that are actually, they actually believe. And it is this institution of having other scientists review your work and all come and criticize and point out the wrong things that I passed, that I self-implemented, that I believe, okay, this is something I'm comfortable putting into the world and putting in the hands of a scientist, a physicist, and many people who are going to interact with the game.
I mean, Rob, I agree with your diagnosis that there's a great deal of uncertainty and sort of unhappiness in different parts of the world. There are problems across the UK university sector. There are various universities that seem to be quite close to bankruptcy. The US is on a different scale. Kind of NIH cuts. Universities that are being told where they've been allocating 60% overhead, they can only have 15%. Those are massive changes. I guess if we, publishers, were a stock market, I think we've priced that gloom into our expectations. It's not that it's not there. I think we're all assuming it's going to play out. And I think the process that's being gone through at the moment is probably an awful lot of librarians being told, can you model a 20% budget cut? Because we're really not sure what's going to happen at a university. And I think, I would hope, the optimistic part is that in reality, when all the information comes in and those universities know where they are, that might be a 3%, 5%, 7% budget cut. And that might be unpleasant for some of us to an extent, but I don't think as bad as we've perhaps been fearing. I mean, it's so hard to know. You look back at what happened after 2008. For the Royal Society, we kept growing revenue despite the fact there was very acute economic pain going on. Will that be the same this time? Perhaps not. It may be sort of catastrophic and horrible and rather different to the kind of economic shock that COVID gave us or 2008 gave us. But I think we're all planning for the worst, and I think the reality will probably be quite a bit better than that. But come back next year, and we'll actually know sort of in 12 months' time.
I think we're a resilient community, aren't we?
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right, and I think that's a really good note to start to wrap on. Is that I think the silver lining in all of this is, are the challenges here? Do we wish that these challenges were not being faced? Of course, there's some very, very real concerns going on in the market, in the world right now. And I do think this is one of the most difficult times that we as a community have faced. That being said, I think when times are good, if you are in a stable market, that yields complacency, or that breeds complacency. And so I do think that the underlying fact that makes me hopeful is this idea that all the things that we've been talking about doing, all the collaborations, we need to get rid of the PDF, we need to get rid of insistence on brand, all of these things that were kind of these nice, innovative ideas, but we didn't face the very real pressures to actually do them. I think the time is now, because we're forced to do them, because we need to cut costs, because we need to put away with ego, because we need to actually work together to face what comes next. So that actually makes me hopeful.
Yeah.
We have 2 more questions, I think.
Do you want closing statements for us, or do you want more questions?
Anyone like to give a final question from the audience? Well, in the absence of that,
did you have a couple of things I was going to say?
Yeah, please.
So something I liked yesterday, Chris Leonard from Cactus, I can't really see who's in the room. Chris, you might be here. Brought up the idea that perhaps we don't need to review all articles. And I do think at root that is the solution to the peer review crisis, is that we move from something that worked as cottage industry, where you could, have a journal that has 40 submissions a year and publishes 18 papers. You could review everything, in a defined community. That wasn't a strange behavior. When you've got scientific reports, reportedly, sort of going to be publishing 45,000 articles this year, peer review is a somewhat different challenge at that kind of scale. It's a different thing. And if you expect every paper to be peer reviewed, you saturate the research community and stop people doing what they're supposed to be doing, actual research. I think, perhaps we'll get to a point where we might want to start formalizing mechanisms for deciding which articles are worthy of peer review and which aren't. I think some of the AI is interesting here, that, the tools can't quite do this yet, but, they're getting towards the point where they could start pointing out this article clearly has ethical problems. There's different ways you can look at that, but things like, sort of citations that don't resolve, they're just made up articles. If somebody's got 15 of those in an article, it's very unlikely that's a legitimate researcher doing good research. There's something has gone wrong there, and you should treat that with caution. They may be able to point out this is a well-meaning but rather incompetent academic, doesn't really understand what's in the research he's citing, and has drawn the wrong conclusions, and perhaps this is not a great piece of research to look at. Another paper might be just a small incremental addition to a field, perfectly sound but pretty low-key. Something else might be really exciting and warrant more treatment. I think those kind of triage tools may be available quite soon, and that's actually quite interesting. And it's
the whole pre-submission.
It's the machine plus human type thing. So I think that's an interesting area that we'll talk about more. And then the last general point I would make, which kind of draws together lots of things we're talking about, I think as an industry, we're used to everything staying the same, and the PDF perhaps is the embodiment of that for decades you come up with a solution and you stick with the solution. I think we're moving into a world now with lots more information, ability to use that information, more flexible technologies, more powerful technologies. We actually might have to start making more deliberate choices and thinking about what we want to do, and thinking, in this field, this is the right solution, in this field, something else is. Or one publisher might want to do something one way and someone else might want to do it another way. I think we may move away from there being conformity solutions to more creativity, more thought, and better outcomes.
I love that, because it speaks very much about technology and about infrastructure, which I live and breathe in, and I think we need to just get rid of that legacy that we are carrying around for so many years, specifically around technology that is built in the last century. So really moving on, and there's great technology companies that are emerging also more and more. I think that it's a sign for also a very dynamic, potentially dynamic industry that is about to emerge there.
So less conformity, more collaboration, less PDF,
Yes.
and more thinking about the researcher and what is the impact that we all need to make. So I think we all have our marching orders for coming out of here, of things we're going to think about in the next year and things we want to see when we're sitting up here again in a year's time. I want to thank this panel so much for the great discussion.
I'm very conscious that I'm the last person keeping you from your lunch and your journeys home for the weekend, so we'll keep this short. But I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for attending the conference, for asking some really great questions, and for making everything so memorable and unique. I also wanted to remind everyone of the awards winners, those who weren't there last night, those who were, because we had some great winners last night. First of all, the award for contribution to scholarly publishing, which Richard Gallagher won. The ALPS Impact Award. The winner was Frontiers for Young Minds, highly commended Atom Grants, well done to them. The award for Innovation in Publishing, which was won by AI Talks with Bone and Joint, well done. Our Rising Stars Awards, Isabel Burks, Eleonora Colangelo, Elizabeth Fraser, and Eleanor Potts. And a couple of other awards to mention that we didn't do last night. The ALPSP On-Demand Prize Draw was won by Callum Barton of IOP Publishing, so well done to Callum. And for those of you who took part in the first ALPSP game on the app, which I recommend everyone doing next year, it's great fun, we have 3 third place, second place, and first place winners to announce. Third place, I don't know if they're still here, but Rachel Gladman from the Royal Society won a free dinner ticket. Second place, and this is two people from the same organisation competing against each other. So Sam McWilliams from PA Editorial, second place. Free place on a training course or ticket at the READEC conference of his choice, or her choice. First place, Lizzie Dawes wins a free place at the ALPSP conference. So well done to Lizzie. And some more thank yous to make here. A very special thank you to all our speakers and chairs, to Phil Garner and the programme committee. I think we all agree that an excellent programme was put together, covering lots of the different aspects and challenges of publishing. And I hope you all got some great takeaways to take back with you. And as always, again, many thanks to our sponsors, without whom we would not be able to do this conference. And we're also very grateful for your support. And then finally here, a special thank you to all of the ALPSP team, particularly Wayne, Susie and Emily, in organising what I think you'll all agree was a great conference, making sure it's all gone smoothly. So can I please ask you to join me in a round of applause for the ALPSP team? Thank you. And please do save the dates for next year's conference. It will be on the 9th to the 11th of September 2026. There's also Redux 2026 in Liverpool in March, more details to follow. And if you're all going away feeling infused to boost your career skills, which I hope you are, there's still time to register for the Practical Career Development Workshop on the 23rd of October, which is a fantastic opportunity to build confidence, gain new insights, and connect with peers. So please do not miss out on these opportunities to develop your skills. Visit the website to get more information or speak to any member of the ALPS team before you leave. And finally, lunch is available for those who can stay in the podium restaurant downstairs. Please do recycle your badges and lanyards by leaving them on the registration desk. And thank you again. Have a safe onward journey and a lovely weekend.